we want a world where people, instead of like firmly or 100% believing what Bible and what this majority religious says, we think that it will be, we think they should instead discuss about what is exactly the right thing to believe, which we think there are, in the status quo, in this religion, there are something that are extremely untrue and should be changed. Hence, we are proud to propose. In my speech today, I'll first do a setup, and then I'll offer our team's first two arguments, which is first, we'll bring more progress to religion and bring social utility. Second argument on how we reduce the amount of extremism, and which also can lead to great significant impact. First, the setup. What does our counterfactual look like? It looks like a world where people openly discuss and religious churches openly discuss about information that should be changed. And we think that this will be a predominant narrative and discussion. For example, like majority of people like will be discussing, for example, all the religious believers will be talking about like, oh, if this idea or this belief is from something that's from a God that is imperfect. If this information is the thing that God mistakenly has written and should be changed or not, we think that this is where we mean. And we think that in a world where God are being viewed imperfect, we think that there will also be more rooms where people actually change their have slight change or think more about what to believe and how much they should believe, which we think is extremely good. Now move on to our first argument on how we bring more progress to religious. In Exodus, it says that women are inferior and should serve men. In Christian and a lot of other religion, they say that you should not be LGBTQ. It's a sin for doing so. And also they're also extremely biased toward men and also hate toward LGBTQ. And we think, and there are also cases where in Christian, it says that slavery are also allowed, which lead to firm belief in the United States during Civil War that treated an slave like object that's bring atrocity to slaves. And we think that these are the reason. We think that these dealt extreme damage to this group of people, and we think that we are living in, and we think that these are all the reasons why gay, women, LGBTQ, etc., like all these movements are being hindered. And we think because religion is always in the way to stop and hinder this group of people. We think that in 21st century, we cannot believe there are people are still racist and are still biased to and still aggressive to our other group. And we think this exists because these people believe in religious. They believe in a perfect, we think that in a perfect world, in a world where perfect God exists, these people will think that, these gods are perfect, so what they're saying must be true. And we think that it's these kind of beliefs that lead to people abusing and having extremely aggressive thoughts toward these LGBTQ, gay or woman movement. And we think that the impact of this is that having a world where we can actually talk about what is actually the right idea or what is actually should be changed. We can not only fix or alter some religious belief, but we also think that this brings social utility, such as more social movement being passed and give more rights to women, LGBTQ, Black people, etc., that were hindered by religious before, which we think they should deserve the right that they deserve. And I will take your points.
Oh, your side is characterizing as if God is imperfect in the status quo, but doesn't the info side literally says that the God is perfect in the status quo?
No, we say that we say that this is in our counterfactual, like God will be as a imperfect being. We think that all the benefit that we claim on our first argument directly talked about, for example, how more religious social movement will be passed, are all an impact of how will happen if God are being viewed on our side world, if they are being seen as an imperfect being. Now moving on to our second argument on why we reduce the amount of extremism. In jihad, it literally says that if you go against God, you can literally kill them. I would think that a majority of Muslim attacks are caused by extreme believers, because they want to serve the God so bad. For example, in Quran, it says that as long if you can serve God, then you're doing good things. And we think that people who want to be rewarded by that feeling will be very likely tempted to do so. And this is the reason why we have all these Muslim terrorist attacks happening in the world that cause extreme fear. And we think that yeah, we concede that there's only small amount of cases there, but we think that the impact is extremely high, and we should look at and value the impact that's happening. We think that on your side world where these extreme attacks can happening, we think there are also a few layers of impact. First, we think that there will be more civilian dying, more citizens dying. Second, we think that there are other extreme followers will also be excited by this action. For example, they see their fellow religious believer doing this action. So we think that they will also have a high likelihood of doing this because they are being excited of this feeling. And we think that on our side world, where people don't view them as a imperfect being, for example, people like a being that can actually make a mistake. We think that these belief, for example, like if you go against law, you can kill them. Like these kind of belief will not be that firm in their head. And we think that this can also make them have more thought to think about, like decide if this information is a mistake or not. And we think that this potentially leads them to not think of this leads to less extremism, which we think can also bring significant impact to the society. For all the reasons above, we're proud to propose.
The correct comparison we should make today is the comparison between good results and bad results in the status quo, not the past genocide of LGBTQ community. Please do not cherry-pick the extreme examples because the hatred against LGBTQ and minorities is literally what both sides have in today's society, regardless of religion. I repeat, it exists regardless of the religion, and that is why their whole case falls from the beginning. Gods are not a role models. They should be the ones that is totally capable of leading their followers to heaven no matter what. They should be the ones who can reach to you no matter how poor you are and how miserable you feel right now. Once a poor person starts being afraid that God might not reach you, they automatically lose this debate to oppose. A few layers of framing. Our side would like to present two stakeholders, and if we manage to provide a better quality of life to these stakeholders, we win today's debate. First, about the believers. The believers are middle and upper class people. Why do rich people believe in religion in the first place? They believe in religion because they don't want to lose the things they have in their afterlife, because they want to continue their lives. They believe in salvation. Second, the poor followers. God acts as the only hope and motivation for living to the poor, especially the absolute poor. And the correct versions of God is they're seen as perfect being in status quo. God isn't your model. They're the supernatural being that is capable of following all your sins and saving you from the current life of your afterlife. They represent hope and the existence of forgiveness. People look to certain people often because they have endured hardship and have done something that seems hard. However, God should be different from role models. Why? Because God is supposed to be considered as perfect being and someone who doesn't face the many difficulties and challenges in life. They should be perfect enough to be able to help each other and their believers in a way. I would like to define perfect and imperfect here. Perfect is when God has an immense power over everything. This means that it can do anything you want, such as getting you out of the poverty cycle, never making any mistakes, and is always rational. Imperfect means we define imperfectness as a possibility of not reaching you. He's likely to have bias, just like any human beings, and he can discriminate certain groups in society depending on their socioeconomic class or their race. God is not capable of being represented with you every time. Gods don't have an immense power to control everything on their side of the world. Now, moving on to Jim's first argument, which is about motivation of life, the will to live for poor followers. Judge, what is the most vulnerable stakeholder in today's debate a healthy religion must protect? There are the poor and miserable people. The premise in this argument is that when gods are an imperfect being, there is likely to lack power and be biased in the first place. In this situation, the main stakeholders, which are the poor, will feel two things. First, lose great amount of hope in the first place in their lives, since they will believe that since gods in the first place are imperfect being, they cannot provide themselves with a better quality life, and lose any way they can rely on when they are suffering. Second, since gods will be biased and the poor will think that gods in the first place will not even look and care for them due to the fact they are poor and do not have anything valid to give to the gods. Then why are hopes that the gods give to the poor extremely important? This is because it gives the poor, especially the absolute poor, a hope in living their lives and making them feel happier compared to the actual situation they're in. As an individual who is living through absolute poverty, you have to see a lot of your loved ones die, such as your families, friends, die in front of you due to diverse factors like starvation, insufficient medical care, etc. And you are in great suffer since you don't have clear access to essential supplies and has to see many people around you die. The pain that these individuals get is too intense that if you are a human being, it is very hard to endure. What gods do here is that they act as a reliance to these people, giving them hope and happiness. Since changing their situation will be extremely hard due to their living in absolute poor areas, we believe that the focus here is to providing them with the most happiest world. Then why are these hopes, let me define, such as believes that gods had enough power to first change their situation and second give balance into the society overall. Before moving on to our team's second argument, is there any POI?
Why explicit to your side that poor people can receive compassion from God? Because God also provides compassion to poor people under our side.
No, but then they can't in the government side, because as I already mentioned in our model, the God, if they're imperfect, they will be biased. So even if the poor would just think that the gods would not reach out to them, because in the first place they're biased, and in the status quo, how biased person looks like is they don't care for the poor, they only care for rich or middle class people. Now moving on to the second argument is, how will an imperfect God lead to excuses or violent social norms? The premise in this argument is an imperfect God means that people believe God wrongly creates certain people, beings, and makes them do certain actions inherently. On our side, the most capable and in the greatest being of the mankind is the imperfect being. It means two things. First, you blame your miserable life to the God, and you think that God made a mistake when he was creating you. You think you are a mistake. So people are going to feel a sense of worthlessness and will attribute all their own struggles and failures to divine error. Whenever they're faced with setbacks, they're very likely to believe that they are inherently flawed because God created them that way. Why is this so? If you look at the status quo, there are people, regardless of their religion, who blame their inherent selves and genes due to their incapabilities and such. So with God now being imperfect, many marginalized and other groups of the religion will feel this way. The belief will lead to less motivation and such attitude with where people are not willing to improve themselves and not be responsible. This is likely to lead to a violation of the social norms, and for them, they will say it is justified. Second, you think that God might not be watching you because they are not capable enough. In the status quo, God is preserved as someone who is always looking after you and who protects everyone no matter what. This is what creates people's trust and faith in this divine being and his guidance. However, with God being seen as limited in its abilities and having a bias just like humans, followers can question whether God is actually true, watching over them, or if they're actually capable of helping them when they need. Vulnerable populations are most likely to feel this way because they're being less prioritized in the status quo by other humans, and if God has a simple perception of them, this will create a disconnection from them. We believe whenever they do something wrong and against society, rather than seeking forgiveness and regretting for their actions, people are likely going to blame the gods for their wrong creation. They also won't be sure if gods actually want to help all of those followers, and this will only lead to miserable lives to the followers themselves. And these are the reasons why we're very proto-opposed.
Two clarifications. Firstly, they say that, oh, the societal progress we see now, it's the status quo. So God's being seen as imperfect beings must be more than just questioning the Bible. It must mean that God must be biased and God must be discriminating people. No, the world where we prefer, where gods are seen as imperfect beings, is where all people, all followers of a religion view gods as imperfect beings. This means the biggest delta of this debate doesn't come from most followers around the world who already do question God, but is most concerned about the most extreme followers of religions who believe that everything that God sees is the right thing. This is the people we see protesting in front of gay movements or protesting in front of abortion clinics under the name of God, under the justification that the Bible provides them. This is the world, and where these kind of people do not gain justification under the name of God is the world that we prefer. Second clarifications. What mistakes, what imperfections are we talking about here? Because the imperfect God that opposition portrays does not seem like God here. We say that the mistakes or imperfections that the God will be making that is not going to be that God promotes slavery or God says it's wrong to be gay. That is actually what the Bible actually says. Rather, we would say that what the imperfections the dominant societal narrative will follow the societal progress. For instance, what says in the Bible is outdated, and the biggest harm of an omnipotent or perfect God is that we cannot retract the mistakes or words that are wrong in the Bible that backslides societal progress. That was our entire prime minister's case. We say that God being imperfect will less likely be that they're going to hate certain people, but it would more so be that, hey, there's some of the words they have, like some of the concepts they had would be wrong, and this is the new value that the society prefers. This looks like Pope Francis openly agreeing to the ideas of like LGBTQ people being accepted into Catholicism. This looks like a lot of African American people being able to still enjoy Catholicism despite what has been said in the Bible that disregards them as equal human beings. This is the imperfect being of God that we prefer. Which moves me on to reconstruct our prime minister's case about how we improved societal discourse on the values that the religion promotes. We tell you that when gods are seen as perfect beings, it causes backsliding of societal progress because certain words in the Bible directly empower voices against minorities. It always provides a wayward for justification and rationalization of what extreme actions people can do under the name of following the God, under the name of following everything that says in the Bible. This looks like, as I've told you, the biggest pushback against gay rights movement are people who stand under Catholicism and say that, hey, it is a sin to be gay. Or say that, oh, hey, it is wrong to abort people. Or in certain religions, hey, women are inferior to men, and that causes the most backsliding against women's rights in those certain countries. If gods are seen as imperfect beings, this means that we have more societal discourse around whether or not this value is what we this particular portion of the religious text is what we prefer as a society. Extremism will happen far less under our side of the house because most extremists are powered under God's world. Although we concede that these happen with low probability, these are the things that have the most impact on our society. A lot of genocides and war crimes are happening under the name of religion, and we prefer a world where this does not happen. If God cannot retract some of his words, if we cannot, as a society, accept that some of the religious texts, like not all of the religious texts are perfectly molded moral ideas, we cannot progress as a society. Moving on to our team's last argument about how we can garner more supporters and followers. Judge, what gods can do uniquely is protect people, provide compassion, forgive people. Of course, they can act as a deterrence and provide people with moral compasses, but other actors can do that in the society, such as the CJS or such as providing education. But what God uniquely can do is accept every followers and give them compassion and give followers. This is why we would prefer a world where there is as many people as possible who can fall under the umbrella of the God's protection. And we say that the most ideal version of an imperfect being as a God would look like, for instance, Jesus. Before his crucifixion, Jesus prays to God and shows his vulnerability. He says that he is scared. He says that he is hungry. People see Jesus as an imperfect being. He's scared of what might happen to him, but we see him overcoming fear. under the powerful entity of God. The most popular religion in the world is Catholicism, and we believe there's a reason why this is so. People can more further relate to people who are imperfect, and for people maybe imperfect, but are able to overcome that. And we believe that these kind of narratives are better able to garner support in followers. Comparatively, even though God's voice may lack power under our side of the house in terms of moral compasses, being charitable to them, we would prefer that more people are able to accept this notion of being protected under the God. Another reason why is that a lot of Old Testaments prevents new followers from joining because of the outdated concept. Because this looks like gay people not being able to enjoy Catholicism or not being able to be protected under God, or certain followers of the religion even discriminating within the religion who can or cannot join because of their own biases. These are the most vulnerable people in our society who deserves protection under the God, and they cannot do so if we as a society cannot get over certain outdated concepts and acknowledge that God is imperfect. Judge, moral compasses can be provided by other actors in the society, but what God uniquely can do is provide compassion to all the vulnerable people in the world. And when we prefer a world where religion is more inclusive, that can only happen under our side of the world. Proud to propose.
Marginalized groups is the stakeholder that both sides wants to protect. The characterization of the extreme people simply assumes that these extreme people, terrorists, are strictly following what the God says, whereas actually not. Thus, the Quran tell the Muslim to bomb those 911 buildings. No, right? They tell you to strictly follow and help others, help the poor ones. That is what Quran says. These extreme people are not the main stakeholders that we should be discussing, because they will be saying that's a symmetric harm, right? People believe what they want to believe, meaning even under the same assumption that the God is imperfect, some confident people, the rich people, will believe that, oh, God is biased towards our side, and these marginalized groups without confidence that was constantly isolated from the society will believe that, yes, God is towards the rich people because they already lost their confidence. This is the correct characterization that we should make for those marginalized groups and the extreme people. Okay, we believe their entire case just relies on those extreme terrorists, but there's no proper characterization on their side of what these extreme people actually look like, right? Do they really follow these Bibles they have, right? Yeah.
Tell me
yeah,
how your side protects gay people.
POIs in the chat, please. And this is their main assumption, that those extreme people follow these Bibles, right? And they literally admitted that this has a low probability. They literally admitted it. And what these extreme people do is that even if the God is imperfect, they will still do so because they believe what they want to believe. These people don't follow what your church says. They simply believe what they want to believe. And this is why their assumption is wrong. Yes, I'll take POI.
Tell me how your side protects gay people when the Bible directly says that it is
our prime minister already clarified this. The hatred against gay people is regardless of the religion. So why is this relevant to this motion, right? That is regardless of the religion. People hate the LGBTQ people, right? And does Bible really say the slavery is good? No, right? Literally, Jesus took those Jews and escaped the slavery. And yes, the Bible might be outdated because it's written by the human beings of the God saying, right? God says to love everyone without discrimination in our world. Even if this is not true, hatred exists regardless of the religion, right? And few clarifications. All followers think that the God is imperfect. That is the statement made by their side. Under the same thing, as I mentioned, people think differently. Confident people believe that, the God might be biased on our side, and the poor people believe the opposite way, which I'll characterize further in my speech, because people believe what they want to believe. That is a general assumption of the public, right? Extensions. About the social isolation of the marginalized groups that we want to protect. We want to protect those poor people, not just the gay people, which is their only stakeholder they're protecting, right? What do these marginalized groups look like? They already lost their confidence to stand up in their society because society isolates them and ignores their opinion. For instance, the poor people, right? For marginalized followers, religion is their is where they voice up, believing that this absolute being capable of being everywhere, every time will listen to them, right? On their side, if God is an imperfect being that cannot listen to everything and might have certain bias, well, even if the God is not biased, marginalized groups feel excluded. Why? Because they already lost the confidence that people will listen to them. Because the society is biased against them, right? No matter how we characterize the God, the fact that he's imperfect itself makes them feel muted and unheard. A single possibility of the God being biased means the isolation of these marginalized people. The religious community will also isolate them because they believe in the biased God, right? That is the correct characterization that we must provide to the God and the marginalized group, not just small population of gay people versus the mass population of starving people out there, right? Moving on to our third argument, how perfect gods make rich people contribute to the society. I'll prove two things in this argument. One, better quality of life for rich people. Two, how does better quality of life lead to the exclusive benefit on our side, which is rich people contributing to the society. Premise of this argument is that middle/upper class people will only help out the poor only when they think the absolute being is always watching them if they're following the Bible or not. If the mechanism we provide under this is that if God is imperfect, both sides characterize it as not being present all the time or sometimes being biased. Those rich people who are dominating the society would believe that God is biased towards their side no matter what the truth is. Again, a single possibility of God being biased results in two ways. First, confident people believe that God is biased towards them, and second, the marginalized and not confident people believe that God is not on their side, so they see what they want to see. Let's talk about the first part. In their word, because rich people want to believe that God might not be watching on them, whether they are doing the good things or not, they are likely not to follow the religious doctrine. The current motivation of rich people to donate and volunteer is because they're scared of the consequence that this fair God, almighty God, might not forgive them of not donating and not volunteering, right? But because they believe what they want to believe, they would think that God might not punish. They would think that God might not punish you for not sharing the wealth on their side. The impact, obviously, the less contribution, donation, volunteer from the rich people to the society, which at the end impacts those vulnerable stakeholders, the marginalized groups who needs those charity from the Christian organizations or those rich religious people helping out and donating them. And that is at the end the impact we propose. Again, George, if you successfully prove why we provide better quality of life to marginalized group, we win the debate. And we already proved to why they have a better voice because they think the God is all fair and all listening. And because rich people help out them more in our world where God is perfect and observing everything. Proud to oppose.
Basically, the biggest clash in this debate is the characterization of what will the world be like. They talked about how God is suddenly going to be all biased and lose all their followers because as imperfect means that God is just totally some kind of villain. We don't think that this is a reasonable and realistic characterization of God. As our PM have talked about, God, when God is imperfect, it means it does not look like God suddenly just go attacking or discriminating everyone. Imperfect does not mean suddenly this person becomes a villain and attacks everyone. Imperfect means that he is just going to be similar to human beings. He can make mistakes and will change like human beings, and that's how human learns. First, for example, Jesus is not portrayed as absolutely perfect and has absolute power because Jesus also fears. He also fear when he is about to die, and he also experiences hunger. But then he also changes his attitude because he then forgives those people. This shows how God is not perfect and God actually changes. And there are still many Christian followers who believe in Jesus and actually trust Jesus. And in fact, Christian is one of the biggest religion in the world. We don't see how God can be suddenly biased or discriminating people, or how people will just mistrust God and just be miserable. And they talked about how poor people are miserable, which is their only case. And this is just not true because God, they will say like, I will love you anyway, as they said. Why is poor people not involved in that? Why is poor people not involved in everyone? This is just ridiculous. And we all, DPM and our previous speakers have already talked about how religious believers include poor people, and we will also in our side people will openly discuss about whether the religion is actually true or not, because they believe that God can make mistakes. So there will be more discussions and more rational critical thinking in our side of the road of whether the principle or the morals in those Bible are actually true and actually moral. And this is exclusive to our side. And now moving on to the first class, which side can offer a better progress of civil rights movement and social utility. They talked about how gay movement or gays, they are not in this debate because they're not affected by religion. This is not true. They said this is an extreme example, but it is not. If it is an extreme example, why are there so many countries, like over half of the countries, that does not allow gay marriage? This is because religion is the biggest obstacle of civil rights movement.
Sure.
Want to flip their characterization. They said that God is watching you all the time and they're afraid of these consequences. This is the reason why so many people obey to Bible thinking that God is thinking that gay is a sin, and because they're afraid of God punishing them, so they do not choose to accept gay because God is so perfect and so powerful. They think that if they accept those gay people, they are also doing sin, and they will be punished by such powerful God. There will be more fear on the opposition side, which actually hinders civil rights movements. Like another example is like why the American took so long time, like decades and decades of getting rid of slavery. Again, we tell you it's because of religion. As PM talked about, the Bible, it literally says that slavery is justified in one chapter. It is right to abuse Black people's right. It took them years to change this because people believe in that so much. They think God is so right, and they just do everything what Bible says, even though if it's morally unjustified. They just believe it because God is made as a perfect image. And why does this not happen in our side? Because people believe that God can make mistakes. The rightness and the moral principles can be actually wrong. There will be more like discussions and open discussion because people believe that God can make mistakes. They won't be feared to challenge God because God is not so perfect in our world. They won't have absolute power over everything. This means that people have more courage to actually challenge them and have discussions and actually just make what is really right to do, what is really morally good to do. And this is usually so people are more likely to change their beliefs in our side, and it's more likely to align with the social predominant principles and morals. And we believe that these harmful behaviors are to the most vulnerable people and the minorities in the world, which is the government's role to actually protect these people from being harmed. And religion, we don't think that it should be a way to push people away. Religion should be accepting everyone, including gay people or including Black people. We tell you that religion in our world is going to be much more inclusive, because gay people are not going to be restricted to join like Christian, because many Christian people think that they are a sin. So moving on to how will people actually be affected by God? They talked about how this can so I'll more talked about how this creates social utility. They talked about how like our case of religious terrorist is so extreme, but we tell you that if we shape God as a perfect figure with with absolute power that can control everyone, people who like believe in that will absolutely believe that every principle is perfect, agreeing with all the moral principles. This will lead to religious terrorists more on themselves. At least we can reduce some of those kind of terrorists, because when you believe that someone has absolute power and you believe what they say is right, and if you do not follow that principle, you might be punished. This causes more religious terrorists because they fear that God will punish them. So this causes them to follow extreme like principles or like policies, such as like kill everyone who doesn't believe in your religion, as our PM have talked about in Jihad, because they believe in God so much that they have absolute power. They have to serve God so badly to to like be a good in this, to live good in this world, and that's why they do everything God says, even if it is to harm others. They're only engaged to this, it's just we're extreme. But we agree that this might be like, there might be like not that great possibility of this happening, but the impact of this is so great. We have to avoid this whole thing. The magnitude of people being harmed and killed is so big. Like thousands of people get killed in genocides and like terrorist attacks. So we don't think that and there's more possibility of this happening in their side, so we would like to really prevent this, even if it's not that possible.
Government is opposing our characterization of imperfection of God. They interpreted our model in a way that we said they are villains, they are extremely biased, they absolutely hate every single poor individual in the world. But Judge, no, this is not what we said. What we said is that God will be closer to human beings than he is now on their side. For example, he's likely to have bias just like any human. He can discriminate certain groups in society depending on their socioeconomic class or their race. They are not devils. We also told you that God will not be capable of being present with you every time or have an immense power to control absolutely everything. The Bible might have some outdated opinions, as the other side is stating. It might hate gay people, but that is not the mainstream doctrine they propose. As our second speaker mentioned, the mainstream doctrine is telling the rich people to help the poor ones, to motivate them to contribute to society. And our third speaker literally said preventing extreme people are impossible at the end of her speech. So in my speech, I will present to you two clashes. First clash, which side allows for better motivation for the followers of the religion? The motivation we're talking about here is the motivation of life, a better quality of life, and we'll also discuss personal development. Side proposition has argued that belief in a perfect God in our world leads to extremism and over-reliance, particularly among the poor and marginalized. However, we have proved to you, Judge, that a perfect God provides believers with a powerful source of inspiration and motivation in their lives. When followers perceive their God as flawless, they are motivated to strive for excellence and pursue personal development. Belief in a perfect God creates a sense of purpose and meaning in believers' lives, encouraging them to live life to its fullest. In contrast, let's look at government's case. The notion of an imperfect God may lead to skepticism, especially for vulnerable, poor individuals, and their motivation to strive for a better quality of life and self-development will definitely decrease. Governments sees God as imperfect in the status quo, and they say that main stakeholders are the extremely religious people, but we think this statement itself is very unfair for us. And in their third argument, government has stated that people will be able to accept the imperfectness of God. This point is a huge contradiction of their side. They never even explain why people are likely to accept these imperfections. All they say is everyone will perceive the God as imperfect. However, this point is flawed because, as our second speaker clarified, depending on societal class, people are going to perceive God as what they want to believe. The statement about accepting the imperfections of the deity made by the side proposition does not stand at the end of the debate, because we already proved from the start of the debate how the belief of imperfect gods can result in negative impacts. Do they really think that the poor, one of the main stakeholders, will be accepting imperfections of the God? No, when you are a poor individual, you don't care about the bias that might exist in the religious world, as the government side mentioned. When people are in great suffering and close to death, the reason why they believe in gods are because they want hope in their miserable life, a hope that gods can take them out of a dark world they're living in. Whether the God can actually do this for them isn't important. The main focus is letting them feel happy or less miserable, at least. In the government branch, they are not understanding this fact, and by supporting the imperfection of gods, they're automatically taking away a hope for these people to continue their lives. Of course, the poor will be in devastation when hopes are taken away and not accept this major change in their lives. Moving on to our second clash. Which side allows for the protection of all stakeholders in the religion? In this clash, we want to address extremism and reliance and the bias of gods in the opposition's world. In our speeches, we have told you that it is important to uphold the values of inclusivity and compassion within religious communities. Judge, we told you that belief in a perfect God serves as a very powerful tool, an effective tool to promote these values. With God having bias, we don't think this is possible. Additionally, we tell you the potential risks that are associated with perceiving gods as imperfect beings, including the justification of discriminatory practices and the marginalization of certain groups within society. This is also going to justify actions that are against the societal norms, and we have already told you in our arguments that with the perfection of gods, we want the protection and well-being of all members within religious communities, regardless of their background or socioeconomic class or other factors. Government talks about a benefit of the increase in followers. Judge, government has to really understand why people start having faith and believing in a religion in the first place. We have told you from our setup with layers, depending on all the socioeconomic classes in society. Poor people need a source of reliance and a source of hope in life because their lives in impoverished areas are absolutely miserable. And for rich people, although they do not need much hope in life, hope to survive, they want salvation. They want to go to heaven. They don't want to go to hell just because they didn't believe in God. It's coming from the fear. So as we characterize, the imperfectness of God includes the possibility of not reaching you. So people are less likely to believe in God since poor people are likely to be skeptical and they will have less hope even if they believe in the religion. And what would be the interest of most rich people of going to church or some other religious institution to pray and things unless they are deeply religious from birth? They don't even know if they will go to heaven. So they're likely to just enjoy their lives and live their lives to its fullest, and they're able to do that even without the religion because they have the money to do so. Government in this debate, in all of their speeches, they want to focus on other specific stakeholders that are rather vulnerable in society, like the LGBTQ plus community and slaves. Judge, first of all, the focus of this debate are the poor and middle upper class individuals, not specifically gay people. Side government is only focusing on these type of people. The stigma and discrimination of the LGBTQ plus population will exist in religions on both sides, unless God is gay or something. But we don't even know if this will happen. Also, their example of gay marriage simply does not work because this is blocked due to legal reasons and complications. And since we have proved to you overall how stakeholders will be motivated and protected with a perfect God, we win this debate. Proud to oppose.
The biggest clash in today's debate was the characterization of what imperfect looks like, where their side just simply rejects that, oh, when gods are imperfect, they're not being biased, which is, we characterize it as God might be biased, and even the slightest possibility of God being biased makes people worry if they're biased toward this side or that side. That is correct characterization of God being biased. And what does imperfect actually look like? The biggest example of their side God being imperfect is the Jesus. Judge, Jesus is a perfect being because he forgave everything. That is why people respect Jesus, because he did what human beings cannot do, forgiving the ones who killed him. That is why Jesus is perfect, and that is why he was successful in making people overcome the fear, be brave, and be like him, right? That's an example on our side. The only stakeholder they protect in today's debate are the gay people, which has the gay marriage is opposed with many reasons, such as legal reasons and social chaos. We told you that this is a metric harm that both sides cannot address because LGBTQ rejection exists everywhere, right? And even if we fail to protect the gay people, we protect greater number of people because rich people are helping them, afraid of the consequences made by the almighty gods, right? And marginalized groups feel like they're all hurt. And it is not important if they're actually hurt or not. It is the belief that they are being hurt because God is capable of listening to everyone in the society. Whereas their side provides no characterization of what these marginalized groups look like. They just simply repeat that, oh, God being imperfect is not being biased. So we believe that the gay people versus the poor people, marginalized and poor people is a successful trade-off. And our second speaker told you that gay people are the only stakeholders they're protecting. So this is indeed a successful trade-off. The biggest flaw on their side of the logic is that they have no characterization on their side of how people will accept that imperfectness, where we told you how people will believe this or that. This is the correct characterization of imperfectness and how we protect the marginalized group. Let's talk about our another clash about excuse of violating the virtues. It seems like there's a disagreement that their side is claiming people will excuse the perfect being as an excuse of violence, whereas our side believe people make no efforts to overcome that excuse, right? God making mistake means that you are made in a mistake possibly, so therefore you cannot overcome it without that belief that because God made a mistake, and what can you do about it if you're a follower, right? And that just simply creates an excuse of committing those sins and violating those virtues, that because God has literally made a mistake on you, you're labeled a mistake. You label yourself a mistake. That is the correct characterization, again, of excuse of violating the virtues, not those extreme terrorists who just simply go on a terror. And often terrors are, regardless of the religion, is often more about the anger against the society. So the point of they have two irrelevant points total. First, the gay people, which their marriage is illegal for legal and social reasons, and second, the terrorists, who often do the terror just by with the anger towards the society, not simply because they're religious, right? That's a discriminatory statement, that just because you're religious and extreme, you're going to commit terror, because that's often regardless of the religion. And that is how we successfully prove all the irrelevant points, and that's how we characterize imperfectness and the marginalized group. Proud to oppose.
The thing is, Judge, it's not about whether or not God will make any further mistakes. Mistakes have already been made. God has already fallen in our society. When it says in Leviticus that it is wrong for men to love men, or when it says in Exodus that slavery can be justified, or when it says in the Corinthians that since Adam was made from Jesus, Adam is inferior to Jesus, and since Eve was made from Adam, Eve and women are inferior to men, mistakes have already been made. So this debate is about how we as a society can resolve these mistakes and still progress as a society. We told you in our case that God being imperfect being allows progress of religion, takes away power from extremist groups, and allows people, garners more supporters. In my speech, I'm going to be as charitable as possible for their characterization and still prove that we won. Their response to our case about extremism and how it prevents social discourse by such as the gay rights movement, they said that confident people will believe whatever they want to on their both sides. So this is irrelevant. But remember, this was not our mechanism. Our mechanism was that when God is perfect, it empowers, it justifies, it rationalizes its beliefs and what their followers say under the name of God, under what the God has said. It's not that the gay rights, the God can stop the gay rights movement. It's that people who are against gays can now use what it says in the Bible as a justification to further empower their anti-gay movement. It is not that God can stop extremist movement, but it's that extremist movements now can garner more followers by indoctrinating people under what it says in the Quran. It empowers these movements that we do not want in our society, that stops and causes backsliding of societal progress. This is the deadlock of whatever societal discourse we have when God cannot make mistakes. When these three examples of what it says in the Bible has to be true, but we also want to proceed as a society and be more inclusive. Their mechanism of therefore, it is very relevant when we bring in extremism and gay rights movement into this debate, because it is God being perfect is the key reason why these anti-movements are empowered in our society. Let's be charitable again. They say that the mistakes that gods make is not aligned with the dominant social narrative, and it's more about God may not be present, not may be looking over you at all times. God may be discriminatory. But if that means God not being able to oversee everyone at all times, but like may not see you at certain times, means that gay people can now be accepted in our society, that more people can now fall under the protection of God, even though he may not be present with you all times. We say that it is still better than having no God or having no external being who may be capable of protecting you. We say that that is still a win, because we want a religion that is as inclusive as possible. I told you that the unique thing religions can do is provide compassion and protection. If we want deterrence, if we want to protect minorities or poor people, let the government do that. But what religions can uniquely do in our society is ensure that all people can come into one and fall under the protection of God. If that's what it takes, if God's not being able to spy over every people is what it takes for gay people to be approved in our society, to not be banned from entering their church as an LGBTQ person, if that's what it takes, we're willing to trade it off. We prefer a world where religion is inclusive. Proud to propose.